to, we have to set up.
Good evening and welcome to the Darien Garden Club meeting. A few things related to Zoom. Please mute and turn off your video during the presentation and use the chat for comments and Q&A. Welcome to our March meeting. Tonight's presentation with Ken Johnson is on good bugs in the garden, such as this lacewing. The Darien Garden Club celebrated 20 years of growing together in 2021. The Darien Park District started our garden club in 2001. This is our mission statement. We encourage gardeners and nature lovers and environmentalists. We try to increase your knowledge, promote respect for the natural environment, and meanwhile, we cultivate friendships with those that share these pursuits. We are a member of the National Garden Clubs and Garden Clubs of Illinois. We have monthly meetings, much like tonight. When we meet in person, it would be at St. John Lutheran Church in Darien. Many times over the years, our members have contributed to our programming. One of our favorites is the plant exchange. We've had many dynamic speakers sharing their knowledge. And along the way, we have a lot of fun and a lot of smiles. During the growing season, we have member garden walks for learning and socializing. These go on rain or shine. There's usually a crowd. These are always fun. Our members point out different things in their garden. We do field trips year round. This is at Ball Seed. Cantini Park in the spring and fall. We visited Trudy Temple's farm up in Marengo, Hauserman's Orchids, and these usually include a nice lunch. Our club was involved in service projects very early on. The Park District asked us to help with the upkeep of the Peace Memorial at Darien Community Park, and this photo is from 2002. We work out there in all types of weather. We've planted poppies that VFWs flower. We make sure it looks good all year. One of our early members passed away and bequeathed us some daylilies. She was a World War II vet, and we put some of her daylilies there. The theme is red, white, and blue, and some yellow. We also decorate for the VFW services. Our garden club converted a parking lot island at St. John Church, where we meet, into a butterfly garden. The Conservation Foundation did a site visit, and we were approved as a Conservation at Home site. We added a small statue donated by the Indian Prairie Public Library. The garden looks lovely all year. We work at it all summer and enjoy the insects and butterflies that come by. We meet there monthly to take care of the garden. I remember Claudia rescued this patch of milkweed near the City Hall in Darien. Claudia put up a sign there to alert people not to mow or spray. It's very beautiful when it's blooming. And of course, supplying food for the monarch caterpillar. We have a very active garden therapy group. We work with the seniors at Dimensions Living in Burr Ridge. Flower arranging is just one of the things we do with them. We do some education and lots of visiting. Such a fun group. It's great to see the laughter and the smiles. We've also worked with the children at Willowbrook Corners. They're a lively group, and they were always happy to see us. There even was a visit from Mother Nature. We also work with the seniors at Aspire Living in Westmont. We also tend to their gardens. We work alongside the seniors planting. And yes, we're not fair weather gardeners. We also had some excitement releasing a few pollinators. This morning we released a monarch butterfly.
She has a peacock. That's cool.
And it was a lot of fun for all the residents. We planted their terrace garden in a rainbow, red, orange, and yellow, green and blue,
That's what that was.
blue, indigo, violet, violet onto white. This is our happy crew this year at the terrace garden. We planted the beds with zinnias. It's a fun project for all involved. We also started a pollinator garden. We also do a Green Thumb Club once a month at Aspire Living, doing projects with the seniors. Smiles, education,
Just probably on it.
using their herbs for a dip, and making fun creatures. Garden therapy groups is also therapy for all of us. Our club is involved in philanthropy, partnerships, and community events. We've planted 2 trees at Birchwood over the years. We have placed 2 bricks at the reading garden at our local library. We've encouraged the city to sign the Monarch Pledge and plant habitat for monarchs. We support our Darien Park District habitat conversions at the parks. This is Birchwood Pond, Chestnut Park Rain Garden. This is the newest prairie at Holly Park. We encourage everyone to get out in nature at the parks. This fall in October, we tagged all the trees at the local parks that were oaks, including this gem at Smart Oaks Park. It must be a couple hundred years old. Our club is an associate member of the DuPage Monarch Project. We promote monarch conservation wherever we go. We participate in the Darien Park District Flea Market. We also had a booth at the Park District Farmers Markets. We've also participated at the Darien Women's Club and Darien Historical Society plant sales. We have fun engaging with the public at these events. We've had a partnership with the Indian Prairie Public Library for many years at their seed exchanges. We teach the children how to harvest seeds. We work with them harvesting seeds and herbs. Since 2006, we've had a National Garden Week program in conjunction with the library. It's great education and entertainment, a large crowd, sometimes even giveaways. We enjoy doing this event with the library. We also beautify their grounds by planting their containers, this one for spring, for summer, fall, and winter. We're always invited and happy to be at their community events. We enjoy our time at the library. We always run into somebody new that might be interested in our club. The library has in turn supported our events. Always happy to exhibit with us. We've also been involved with the Prairie Patch Gardens on the grounds at the library. This was a fun planting day. There's education with the children, squash to grow, and harvest. This area is set up for pollinators at Bee's Garden and is a monarch way station as well. We've set up display cases showcasing our club over the years with some education for the public. This promotes our club and gardening. For many years, we also had our large plant sales on the grounds at the library. Lots of plants. In 2015, we started a new fundraiser called Spring Gardening Inspiration. This included lots of education with great speakers. Of course, we had to sell some of our houseplants. We moved to a bigger venue and filled the house. The education revolved around the environment. This showcased our club and all our friendly members. Exhibits and displays were also a big part of this day. And of course, lucky raffle winners. With our club being so active, we applied for several awards through GCI, Central Region, and National Garden Clubs. Here's our crew attending the convention to receive the awards. And there were many over the years. We're very proud of our accomplishments. We're designated GCI Club of the Year for 4 years in a row. 2021 was our 20th anniversary year. Here are some of the things that we did. We encouraged people to use the iNaturalist app and get out in nature for the City Nature Challenge back in April. We planted an oak tree at Birchwood Park. The oak tree was dedicated on Arbor Day. We added a second brick at the Reading Library, commemorating our 20th anniversary.
We're not older than that, though.
We did a Pollinator Week celebration in June at the library. This was our welcome table that day. We highlighted butterflies, honeybees, and hummingbirds. Our biggest event and fundraiser this year was our first public garden walk and bazaar held in July with 6 beautiful gardens. This beautiful pond and vista, a beautiful native garden with a walkway and identification tags throughout. This beautiful and diverse garden with this wonderful bridge over waterways. This beautiful oasis with no lawn and plenty of nectar for hummingbirds. This garden was busting at the seams with blooms. Flowers everywhere. Another gem. This members' garden is amazing. Our members prepared artwork and donated items to the garden bazaar.
There.
Everyone went home with a treasure, and we celebrated when the event was over. This summer at our outdoor meetings, a few of our members received GCI awards. Claudia Borowski received the 2020 Stephanie Green Award, and Eileen Wright, our 2020 VIP. A few of our members received special recognition from the Garden Clubs of Illinois for working on the GCI board. In August, we participated in the National Night Out event. We enjoyed interacting with the families, especially the kids. In October, we celebrated oaks. We did some oak education. We tagged local oaks and set up our display. It was a beautiful day. There was education, activities for the kids, even helping them become a squirrel. There were acorns and oak trees to take home. In October, the mayor proclaimed Darien Garden Club Day on November 1st of 2021. We met at City Hall during one of the city council meetings and were given the proclamation. The mayor read aloud the proclamation, going over all the many things that we've done over the last 20 years. In November, we had our celebration. Here's a photo of all of our members and others who were there to help us celebrate. It's our board of directors who led us through this year and onward into 2022. We ended the year with our annual holiday party. We've been given the charge to continue to grow and to continue to live by our mission statement. Meanwhile, we're going to grow again in friendship and service to nature and, of course, others. This photo is from a new member picnic a few years ago. We're still growing. In 2021, we had 15 new members. Come and grow with us. We're growing in a new way. We're announcing the Darien Garden Club Sprouts for children and families. There'll be meetings, lessons, and child-friendly activities for the families. We're hoping to deliver the Garden Club's mission to the littlest new grade thumbs. We're hoping that you might want to join us. Here's our contact information. The website, dariengardenclub.com. The info at dariengardenclub.com is our new email. Facebook is Darien Garden Club Illinois. You can follow us on Facebook and Eventbrite, and you'll find out everything that's going on. Here are some of the upcoming 2022 events. On April 4th, our general meeting via Zoom, native understory trees and shrubs for the home landscape with Ryan Hancock. On April 9th, we'll kick off our youth program, DGC Sprouts. This will be at Darien Community Park from 10 to noon. On April 29th, we'll join Darien Arbor Day celebration at 9:30 at the Park District's Community Center. On April 30th, we'll have a program with the library to learn all about iNaturalist and the City Nature Challenge. On May 2nd, our general meeting will be a plant exchange, which will be in person at St. John Lutheran in Darien. On June 6th, we'll have our National Garden Week program, again at the library, 7 p.m. And the presentation is on birds, bees, and butterflies. Plant your own pollinator garden with Sarah Michelle. On June 26th, we'll have a pollinator party to celebrate Pollinator Week from 1:30 to 3:30, also at the library. Follow our website and social media sites for all the details and registration information on all of the above.
Website is nothing like that. It's just she puts up pictures and jokes.
Now we'll get to tonight's presentation with Ken Johnson. Good bugs in the garden, such as this ladybug munching on these 8-bits. Remember to mute and turn off the video and use your chat space for Q&A. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Are you ready for me, Kathy?
Yes, I am. If you want to take it away. Bob's going to introduce our speaker for this evening.
I'm pleased to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Ken Johnson. As I speak, I'm putting out his shorter bio. He is a member of the University of Illinois extension team and is very well known in various areas. He publishes, and there's at the bottom of that post, there's a website address to access the extension website, and I urge you to do that. Ken, for example, has some podcasts that are very informative and useful to us all. Ken's talk tonight is about bugs and beneficial insects. And I don't know that I can say much more other than welcome, Ken, and thank you very much for agreeing to speak tonight. And I might add, Ken is very much responsible for our people speaker also. So thank you, Ken, and I guess we can trade screens, Kathy.
Okay, he should be able to share. Ta-da.
All right. So are you seeing a presentation or the notes slide?
We're seeing the next slide.
How's that?
That's good.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for having me tonight. So like mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about good bugs in the garden. So just a little bit of kind of why should we care about insects or what people commonly refer to as bugs. About 95% of all animals on Earth are invertebrates, and insects are going to be part of that group. Of those, over 80% of invertebrates are arthropods, what we would typically consider bugs. So spiders, insects, centipedes, millipedes, those all kind of get lumped into that bug name. Insects account for over 75% of all animal species that have been found on Earth. Right now, we're around 900,000 known insect species. Depending on where you look, estimations run from 1 million to 2 million to even up to 10 million, just kind of depends on where you look. In comparison, the animals we typically think of, we focus on are mammals. There's only about a little over 5,000 species, birds about 9,000 to 10,000 species. So insects just kind of dwarf everything out there. And just some kind of random trivia for you here. For every human, it's estimated there are about 1.4 billion insects. So if we have 7.4 billion humans, there are about 10 quintillion insects at any one time on Earth. So not only are there far more species of insects than anything else, there's more biomass of insects than any other sort of animal out there. So it kind of behooves us to at least understand them and appreciate them a little bit, because without them, the world would not exist as we know it. Typically, when we think of insects, a lot of people are going to be thinking of them as pests. Most people, I would say, in society in the United States and kind of Western culture, consider insects as a bad thing. And I mean, there's good reasons for that. So they can be crop pests. They're feeding on the food we eat, or ornamental pests. We think of things like Japanese beetles, emerald ash borer, not only ornamentals, but natural areas coming in and wiping out ash trees in North America. They can be structural pests with things like termites, carpenter ants getting into homes, causing damage. They can also cause problems with human and livestock. Things like mosquitoes, ticks, which aren't insects, but they kind of get lumped in all together, spread diseases and things like that. So there are bad insects from the human perspective anyway out there. But most of our insects are actually beneficial. Very few, less than 1% of all insect pests that have been discovered are actually considered pests. So again, the vast majority of insects are beneficial in some way. They are food for a lot of different animals. So we have this bird here, songbirds. Majority of them will feed their young insects as they're developing. So Doug Tallamy, if you're familiar with him in his book, Bringing Nature Home, says about 96% of all terrestrial birds in North America, such as Carolina chickadees, rear their young on insects. So if we don't have insects, we lose 96% of our terrestrial bird species in North America. Hummingbirds, we think about them visiting flowers and stuff to feed on nectar. They eat insects too. A good chunk of their diet is actually insects that they're feeding on. Things like freshwater game fish, trout, bass, all of those things feed on aquatic insects. So if people go fly fishing, those flies you're tying are mimicking insects. Insects are also important food sources for humans. Again, outside of kind of European culture, Western culture, a lot of places around the earth eat insects as part of their diet. Asia, Africa, even native societies in North America eat insects as protein source of their diet. So we as kind of, if you're of European descent, we're kind of the oddballs in that we do not eat insects as part of our diet. And that's becoming a little more popular here the last few years. You can get cricket powder, things like that to kind of use like a flour and things like that. They are decomposers, so they feed on dead animals. So the burying beetle in the middle there, they help break down those larger animals so bacteria and fungus can come in and break them down. Recycle plant nutrients, so those termites that you're destroying your house are also breaking down wood in nature and again returning those nutrients to the soil, so we get that nutrient cycling throughout the environment. They also do pest control. So insects are going to be feeding on other insects, like that wheel bug there with that Japanese beetle on the middle left there. They also feed on weeds. So not only do insects feed on our desirable ornamental or crop plants, they're also feeding on weeds and help keeping those plant populations in check as well. And they also will do pollination, which most of you are probably familiar with. So I talked about a lot of this already. So pest control, a lot of our serious insect pests that we have in the United States, North America, are invasive. They've been accidentally brought in one way or the other. So think about Japanese beetles, emerald ash borer, gypsy moth, which name has been changed to spongy moth now. Those are all invasive species. And part of the reason they become invasive is because they do not have those natural enemies that they have in their native areas to keep those populations under control and in check so they don't explode. They get to the United States, North America, there's nothing that feeds on them and those populations explode and they spread all over the place. And, it may seem like the United States is the only place getting invasive insects, but we send our native insects in other places of the world where they become invasive as well. So it's a two-way street here. It's not just us getting them. We're giving them to other people as well. A lot of our native pests are controlled by parasites, predators, and diseases as well. It's why a lot of times we don't see large pest outbreaks with some of our native species, because we have those natural enemies already present to keep those populations in check. When it comes to insects as pollinators, a lot of our plants are not going to be able to reproduce without the help of pollinators. Typically, that's going to be insects. About 75% of all plants on Earth are pollinated by animals. Over 90% of flowering plants are. So kind of the exceptions to that would be a lot of the grasses, corn, things like that. The plants that insects pollinate provide food for not only humans, but also wildlife. So about a third of our food depends on pollinator plant interactions. It's about 150 food crops in the United States that require pollination in order to produce food that we eat. When we think of pollinators, we're typically thinking of bees, butterflies, maybe moths, but wasps, beetles, and flies will also pollinate plants. Here is just a few examples of some of the fruits and vegetables that require pollination. So again, if we don't have pollinators, we're not going to have things like apples, a lot of our berries, our cucurbits, watermelon, cantaloupe, pumpkins, squash, all of those different things require pollinators in order to produce fruit. There are also some fruit and vegetables that are going to benefit from pollination, so they can still reproduce, produce fruit on their own. But when we have pollinators coming in, we tend to get more fruit and larger fruit. So if you look at this picture on the bottom here, this was an experiment done in Germany, I believe. So the picture on the left there, those flowers were open, insects could access them, so they're cross-pollinated by insects. You can see we have those large plump strawberries that you typically want to buy in the store or you're going to want in your garden. On the right there, the individual flowers are bagged, so they're either self-pollinated or they're wind pollinated. So those bags were kind of open and you can get wind movement in there. You can see those plants still have some viable seed on them. So from the plant's perspective, it's not that big of a deal. It can still reproduce, but that's not something we as humans are going to want to buy. And we're not going to be terribly happy if that's what all of our strawberries look like in our gardens. So strawberries is just an example of something that is going to benefit us if it's going to be pollinated. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the different kind of beneficial critters out there. This is not an exhaustive list. This could be a 10-15 part series if we wanted to really cover a good chunk of the insects out there. So we're just kind of scratching the surface here. So one of the big things are going to be natural enemies. So these can be predators, parasites, parasitoids, and pathogens. So these are those insects or other organisms that are going to be managing pest populations. Again, this is from the human perspective. So they're feeding on insects in some way. So they have things like predators. So that top picture there on the right, that is a predatory mite. And on the left, that is two-spotted spider mites. That's a common pest. A lot of times you see those in house plants or a lot of woody ornamentals can get two-spotted spider mite. That reddish mite is one that will feed on it. They'll run around and eat them. If you see mites on a plant, if they're moving rather rapidly, that's a good indication it's probably a predatory mite. Our plant feeding mite species tend to move much slower compared to them. On the bottom right there, we have some lady beetles. So not only are the adults predatory, the larvae are as well. Again, they're feeding on small soft-bodied insects like aphids, whiteflies, things like that. And on the left, we have an aphid lion, which is a larva of a lacewing that again will feed on small soft-bodied insects. We also have parasites and parasitoids. So on the top picture there, that is a parasitoid wasp. It's going to lay its egg inside of that aphid. That egg will hatch. That larva will eat the inside of the aphid, and then a new adult will emerge. Bottom picture, those are the cocoons of wasps that were inside of that hornworm caterpillar. Again, they've eaten the insides and they'll disperse from there. And then the picture on the left there, all those little white squiggly things, those are nematodes, which are kind of like worms. They have eaten the inside of that pupa for either a butterfly or a moth, and they've been released. That pupa will split open and those nematodes will disperse to the soil and attack other insects. And then we also have pathogens, not really bugs, but insects. Just like people and plants, insects will also get diseases. So that white fuzzy stuff, that is a fungus that has attacked this particular caterpillar. So some of the different examples here, we've got spiders. So again, these are going to be predators. There are over 630 species of spider in Illinois. And like a lot of other things, we can classify them in a variety of different ways. So on the left here, we've got some spiders that are going to spin webs to capture their prey. So on the left, we've got a funnel web. So you can see they build these funnel-like sheets. And there's a tunnel at one end. If something crawls by, that spider will run out and grab it. In the middle there on the top, we've got orb weavers. So they're going to spin these large webs, usually attached to plant and structures. They kind of span a distance, and when things fly into that, they will get stuck and the spider will run out and catch them. On the bottom, in the middle, we've got sheet web. A lot of times you see these on like grass or on bushes or shrubs, especially if in the morning, if we have a dew, that'll collect on there. Again, they're capturing their prey in there. We also have our active predators. So these are not, spiders are not actually spinning webs to catch their prey. They're either actively hunting for it or something like that crab spider on the top picture there. It'll ambush prey. So this particular one is hiding on a flower. When a bee or some other pollinator comes by, it'll grab it and eat it. Bottom pictures there on the left, that black and white spider, that's a jumping spider. These are active predators. They'll run around and capture their prey. Some people will actually keep them as pets. You can go out and find places selling those. And then on the right is a wolf spider. Again, this is another active predator. They'll run around in grass and stuff and search out prey. Praying mantids, this is a pretty popular one with a lot of people. So both the adults and the nymphs or the immatures are going to be our predators. So they're feeding on other insects. They lay their eggs in something called an ootheca. That's that kind of white frothy thing on the picture on the left that mantis is laying. On the top right there, that's another example of the ootheca. Basically, it's this big frothy mass that the eggs of those mantids are inside of. They'll hatch out like that picture on the top there. And those little nymphs will go run around and eat things. They'll feed on virtually anything they can capture, which is good, but they're not necessarily the most effective predators in a landscape because they will catch anything, good, bad, or indifferent. A lot of times you will see these sold as biological control agents in nurseries or garden centers. I wouldn't necessarily go out and buy these. A lot of times you'll end up with one or two mantids because they are cannibalistic. They'll eat each other. So you're not going to have, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of pest control for you because usually you end up with only a handful of them in your landscape. If you find, the ootheca, leave it, but I wouldn't necessarily spend money on those trying to get pest management out of them because they're not terribly efficient compared to some of our other predators out there. Stink bugs. Typically, we think of stink bugs as pests, but there are some predatory stink bugs out there that we would consider beneficial. An example of this would be the spine soldier bug. So you can see it looks kind of like brown marmorated stink bug, some of the brown stink bugs that we would consider pests. But you can see on the kind of the shoulder area, it has these sharp spikes. So that's how you can differentiate it from some of the pest species out there. This is a generalist predator, so it feeds on, another thing, it kind of feeds on anything it can catch, but primarily beetle larvae and caterpillars. You can see that on that bottom picture there. Their mouth is kind of like, a beak is kind of like a straw. They'll stick that into their prey, impale them, and then suck out the internal juices. When I talk to kids, I tell them it's kind of like drinking a juice box. Stick that in there and suck everything out. They're also assassin bugs. So these are going to be similar to those predatory stink bugs. The bugs on the left there, these are actually some pest species. So leaf-footed bug on the top there and on the bottom. One way you can differentiate between your predatory and your pest and your plant feeding bugs. If you look on the left, the bugs that are feeding on plants, their mouth parts are much longer and more slender compared to the predatory bugs. So if you look at that bottom right picture, that wheel bug, you can see has a rather short, thick mouth part. So that's one way you can tell the difference. You do have to get kind of close to the insects to be able to see that, which some people may not like. But that is one way you can tell if it's beneficial or a pest. So the bottom left there or the bottom right and the top left are those beneficial ones. That's the wheel bug. That's one we see quite a bit in the fall as they're kind of getting large, and a lot of times food's running out, so they kind of congregate in areas looking for food. On the top right is a type of ambush bug. So again, another predatory bug that we can find in the garden. A few other examples of bugs. We've got minute pirate bug. This is a little black and white insect. Again, feeds on small, soft-bodied insects. It'll also feed on pollen if there's not a lot of insects around. This is another one we can see a little bit more in the fall. Again, as food's running out, they may be in corn and bean plants, and as those get harvested, they don't have anywhere to go. And sometimes they may land on you and kind of probe around, see if you're something they can eat. And when they're doing that, it can be quite painful to some people, but they are good to have around. Another one is an example would be a damsel bug on the right there, kind of slender tan colored. They kind of look like miniature assassin bugs. These are another kind of generalist predator, but since they are smaller, again, they're feeding on small soft-bodied insects, aphids, insect eggs, smaller caterpillars, things like that. A lot of times we'll find them in grasses, in ground covers. And I did mention before, so these insects I just talked about in the last couple of slides, these are considered true bugs. So technically, these are the only insects we should be calling bugs because they are in the order Hemiptera, if you want to be technical about it. Some more somewhat useless trivia for you there. Mentioned these earlier, green lacewings or aphid lions are another good predatory insect that we have out there. So again, the larvae is in that middle picture there. Again, they're feeding on small, soft-bodied insects, aphids, mites, thrips, mealybugs, caterpillars, you name it. They look a little bit like miniature alligators. They have a long, kind of slender, tapered body. And they have two sickle-shaped mouth parts. And again, they'll capture their prey with that and then suck the internal fluids out of that prey. On the right there, you can see that little egg up on a stalk. So lacewings lay their eggs up on stalks. So if you see something like that, probably means you're going to have some aphid lions hatching out of there eventually. A lot of times they'll lay those eggs in or near aphid colonies. So this particular one was on a sunflower leaf, and you can see all the aphids there. So that adult came by, laid eggs. They've kind of got a ready-made meal right there by laying those eggs within that colony. The adults, for the most part, are not predators. They're feeding on pollen, honeydew, and nectar. So when we talk about ways you can attract these beneficial insects, that's going to be important to keep that kind of stuff in mind. And that's the adult on the left there. There's also brown lacewings as well, and those nymphs are also beneficial, feeding on other insects. We also have our lady beetles. So again, both the larvae and the adults are going to be predators. So on the left picture there, that is one of the larvae. Again, they're feeding on small, soft-bodied insects. You can see the eggs on the right there, kind of yellow football-shaped, laid in clusters. And again, a lot of times you can find these laid near aphid colonies and stuff like that. You're probably familiar with the adults look like, but they're kind of dome-shaped insects. There's a lot of different types of lady beetles out there. The ones we see a lot, the multicolored Asian lady beetle, the one that gets into your house in the fall, that seems to be kind of the dominant one that's pushed out some of our native species. But it is still beneficial from the perspective that it will feed on other insects and stuff. And some lady beetles that they've looked at, like the 7-spotted lady beetle, will feed on several hundred aphids a day. As an adult, larvae can eat up to 200 to 300 aphids as they develop. So they can do a very good job of controlling pests for us. We have things like ground beetles. So a lot of these are going to be shiny black, and they have, again, those rigid wing covers that we think of as beetles. So here's 2 examples here. A lot of times we're going to be finding these under leaves, logs, stones, kind of out of the way areas. And they're going to feed on a variety of different insects, caterpillars, beetle larvae, snails, and other soft-bodied insects. So they can do a pretty good job of controlling pests for us as well. The larvae of these ground beetles are also going to be predators. You can see that on the bottom picture there. Kind of long, slender, and they will actively run around and look for prey as well. Syrphid flies are also another beneficial insect. These are commonly confused for bees, but they are actually a type of fly. They're going to be feeding on pollen and nectar as adults. So a lot of times you will see them on flowers. They may also feed on the salts in your sweat. So sometimes they'll visit you, sometimes called sweat bees as well. There are actual sweat bees out there too, just to add to the confusion. This is another one where the larvae are going to be predators, and they will often lay their eggs near aphid colonies as well. The larvae are legless, maggot-shaped, so you can see on this bottom picture here in that circle, that is the larvae of that syrphid fly. And again, it's going to crawl around and feed on aphids. In this particular case, they can consume up to 400 aphids during its development. So again, they can do a very good job of reducing aphid populations for you. Yellow jackets, hornets, and wasps. A lot of times people are not necessarily excited when they see these, but they also will do a lot of pest management for us. The adults are going to be pollinators. They're visiting flowers to feed on nectar primarily, but they may also feed on some pollen. And their larvae are going to be carnivorous. So the adults are going to go out and capture things like caterpillars. They will bring those back to the nest, chew those up, and feed that to their offspring. So again, they can do a very good job of controlling a lot of our caterpillar pests in our plants. So just a few examples of those that we have here in Illinois. So on the left, we have our paper wasps. Those are those wasps that they create those nests, kind of look like an umbrella. A lot of times it always seems to be near your door or things like that. If you leave them alone, they're going to leave you alone. Bald-faced hornets. These are the ones that make those big paper nests up in trees. Those nests only last for a year. So they'll build all of that in 1 year. We'll get a couple of hard frosts, everything will die, and they do not reuse those nests. So if you have a nest like this in your yard, if it's in an out of the place area that you can avoid, just leave it up there. They're not going to be back next year. They can get rather defensive if you disturb the nests. So that's something, if it's near a heavily trafficked area, that's probably something you want to move because they will defend it. And they're not actually hornets, they're actually a type of yellow jacket. And then we have our eastern yellow jackets on the right there. Again, these typically are building their nests in the ground. And again, this is a 1 year thing. They are not going to reuse their nests typically. A lot of times after those nests die off, things are going to get in there. Mice, raccoons, something like that will dig that nest up and feed on any larvae and things that may be in there. But even if it doesn't get destroyed, they don't reuse their nest. So another thing, if it's an out of the way area, just kind of cordon off that area, don't let people near it, and just leave them be. They'll be gone next year, and they're going to control pest populations for you. But again, if it is in a high traffic area, that's again probably something you want to remove because they will defend their nests, and they can be somewhat aggressive when doing that. Cicada killers. So in the summer, a lot of times people will get all worked up about these, especially when the news of the murder hornets that came a couple years ago. A lot of people were confusing cicada killers for those, but these are a solitary wasp. They will go up into trees. They will sting cicadas, paralyze them. They'll then drag those down into their nests, which are underground. They'll lay an egg on that, and the egg will hatch, and the larvae will feed on that cicada, and they will emerge the next year. A lot of times you'll find these in lawns or along sidewalks, things like that, that have looser soil. You can see them digging that out. Unless you step on one of these, they're not going to sting you. The males can be kind of territorial. They may get up in your face and try to scare you off, but the males can't sting. I know that's maybe kind of difficult to tell if it's male or female and you have a large wasp flying in your face, but as long as you don't step them or grab them, they're not going to sting you. Parasitoid wasps. I mentioned these earlier. So with these, they're going to lay their eggs in or on a host. So that could be an aphid, that could be a caterpillar. Just kind of depends on the species we're talking about. Eventually they kill their host, but the host doesn't die until that larva completes its development. The adults are going to feed primarily on honey, honeydew, pollen, and nectar. Honeydew is kind of the sugary secretions that some soft-bodied insects like aphids produce, so the adults will feed on that. And amongst all of our natural enemies, parasitoid wasp is probably going to be the most important at maintaining pest insect populations below damaging levels. There are all kinds of parasitoids out there. A lot of them are very small. You can see that top picture there. That is a wasp laying an egg inside of an aphid. So they're incredibly small. We don't really notice them a lot of times unless you're out actually looking for them. And they do a lot of control for us that we just don't notice. If we were to lose parasitoid wasps, pest populations would explode. So some symptoms of hosts that are parasitized. A lot of times those hosts will change colors. They may get darker in color, especially as the larvae inside of it starts to develop. A lot of times with our aphids, they become mummies. So that picture on the top there, these are oleander aphids on milkweed. You can see normally they are yellow, but when they are parasitized, as that larvae is developing and pupating, those aphids kind of turn brown and papery. Eventually that wasp that is inside there will cut a hole in there and fly out, and then it'll go on and attack other insects for you. Some of them may have the actual larvae attached to the outside of the pest. Just kind of depends on, again, the species of parasitoid we're talking about. You can see on the bottom picture there, all those white things. A lot of times people think those are eggs, but those are actually the cocoons of wasps that were inside of that hornworm there. So if you see something like that, if you have like tomato hornworm or something like that on your vegetables and you see all of these white projections coming out, those are the cocoons of the wasp. Just leave that caterpillar in your garden. It's not going to feed anymore, and you're going to have potentially hundreds of wasps coming off of that to feed on other insects. We can also see some unusual behavior in some of these pest species if they are parasitized. So they may just stop feeding. They may just kind of clamp down on a plant or leaves or stems and just not move because that larvae inside of it's kind of hijacked it and is now controlling it. So that's just kind of a brief overview of some of the predators and parasitoids that we have in our gardens. Again, there are a lot more than that. Those are just some of the more commonly encountered ones. You could throw things in like centipedes. Those are predators that will feed on insects. A lot of other stuff out there. Next, we'll talk about pollinators. So like I mentioned before, pollinators are incredibly important if you're growing plants, especially if you're trying to grow fruits and some of our vegetables. When we look at pollinators, a lot of times we'll talk about something called pollinator syndromes. And these are the flower characteristics or traits that may appeal to a particular type of pollinator. So if you can look at a flower, look at its color, are there nectar guides? What does it smell like? How much nectar and pollen? What's the shape of that flower? And by looking at those characteristics, you can get an idea of what type of insect may pollinate it. These are not set in stone. These are just kind of generalizations that can give you an idea of what may be visiting it. We'll go through these individually. It may be kind of hard to see that table depending on what kind of screen you've got. So beetles, again, this is one group of insects that people don't typically think of as pollinators, but these are probably the first pollinators out there. As flowers kind of evolved, beetles are probably the first thing visiting them. So they tend to like white or green flowers. And again, it's not set in stone because you can see a couple of my pictures here have yellow flowers. Nectar guides tend not to be present, or they're not really necessary to attract beetles. And we'll talk about what nectar guides are in a little bit if you're not sure what those are. Because beetles are so diverse, they are the most diverse group of insects out there. Hundreds of thousands of different species of beetles. Not all of them are going to pollinate. But the odor of the flowers can range quite a bit depending on the type of beetle it's trying to attract. There can be no scent. It can be really fruity. It can be foul or putrid smelling, just depending on what they're trying to attract. Nectar is sometimes present. What beetles are really after are the pollen. So typically, flowers that they visit are going to have lots of pollen on them. Flower shape tends to be large and bowl-shaped or small and clustered, which really kind of almost encompasses every type of flower out there. Again, just kind of depends on the pollinator, the beetle it's trying to attract. Flies. So carrion flies, house flies, things like that, those flies that they're flying around you or around your food, they're kind of annoying. They will do some pollination for us. So the flowers they like tend to be dark brown or purple. These carrion flies are typically visiting dead animals, feces, things like that. So these flowers are mimicking that in that color. Odor, again, they're trying to mimic dead things, tends to be putrid. So again, they're trying to draw these flies in. A lot of times these flies are going to visit these flowers, thinks it's something they can lay their eggs on. They'll do a little looking around, realize they can't. They'll move off to the next flower thinking they can lay their eggs on it, and they'll transfer pollen that way. Picture here is a fly on a pawpaw flower. So pawpaws are one of those plants that are predominantly pollinated by flies and beetles. We also have our flower flies, so things like syrphid flies, hover flies, whatever you want to call them, bee flies on the bottom there. These are mimicking bees, so they're pollinator syndrome matches up fairly closely with what bees like. So flowers, white, cream, pale colors. Nectar guides aren't necessarily present. Musty to sweet smelling flowers. Nectar is going to be present. They're going to be feeding on nectar. There's also going to be pollen present. Maybe not tremendous amounts, especially when you compare it to like beetle pollinated flowers, but they will feed on some pollen as well. Flower shape, flat or bowl shaped with shallow corollas. And the corolla is just kind of all those petals put together. So it's not a very deep flower. We also have moths. So most moths, this is really for kind of night flying moths. Most moths are coming out at night. So flowers tend to be pale red, purple, pink, or white. A lot of times those white flowers kind of glow. They'll reflect moonlight to kind of draw moths in. Nectar guides aren't necessarily present because there's not a lot of light. So they're not really going to be seeing that all that well. Odor strong and sweet and a lot of times emitted at night. That's when your pollinators are out. Makes sense to release your scent when your pollinators are out. Nectar tends to be ample and deeply hidden. You can see on that bottom picture there, moths have very long mouth parts, so they can get down deep into flowers. Pollen is limited. Moths aren't feeding on pollen. So basically there's enough for that flower to transfer some of that pollen to the moth so it can be moved to the next flower. Flower shape, kind of your typical, what you would typically think of as a flower or tubular with or without a lip on it. Butterflies, these are night flying or day flying, so the colors tend to be much brighter, bright red, purple, yellows, things like that. Nectar guides a lot of times are present. Odor is faint but fresh. So you think about the flowers that butterflies are attracted to. We as humans find those attractive a lot. So a lot of flowers that we're planting are going to be attractive to butterflies. Again, that nectar is ample and deeply hidden. They also have fairly long mouth parts to get down deep into flowers to access that, where other insects may not be able to. Again, limited pollen, they're not really feeding on it, just enough for that plant to have it transfer. And then narrow tubes with a spur or have a wide landing pad because butterflies are going to land when they feed. Some moths may just hover when they feed, depending on the species. And then we have our bees. So again, a lot of the flowers we find attractive as humans, bees are also going to find attractive. So they can be bright white, yellow, blue, or UV in color. So bees can see into the UV spectrum. So they can be patterns on flowers that we can't see, but bees can. A lot of our nectar guides, a lot of times are UV that we can't see, but there's lines or where the center of the flower will be really dark. It won't look dark to us, but to bees, it'll look really dark, kind of telling the bees where all the nectar and pollen is. Odor, fresh, mild, pleasant. Nectar is usually going to be present. They're feeding on that. Pollen, limited, again, in the sense compared to beetles. And that table in the beginning, there's also a column for wind pollinated plants. If you think about wind pollinated plants, they produce a tremendous amount of pollen. Things like grasses, oak trees, things like that. If you have allergies, it's probably to wind pollinated plants because they put out so much pollen. So that's kind of relative to some of those plants. Flower shape, shallow with a landing platform or tubular. So we'll talk about some of the types of bees out there. So we've got our honeybee. This is Apis mellifera. This is not actually native to North America. This was brought over by Europeans hundreds of years ago and has now established itself in North America. When it comes to crop pollination, particularly commercially, this is probably the most important bee for crop pollination because we can keep it in hives and it is trucked long distances. So commercial honeybee colonies typically are probably out or just leaving California for almond pollination, and they'll just truck those across the country, hitting up different crops for pollination, whether that be strawberries, cucurbits maybe, and then in the summer they'll go, a lot of times go into the Dakotas and summer there and overwinter there until the cycle begins next year. These are social insects, so you have, in this case, thousands, tens of thousands of bees living together. Colonies can get up to 50,000 individuals in them. They are cavity nesting, which is why we can keep them in their hives. And they're generalist pollinators, so they're going to be visiting a wide variety of different types of plants. When it comes to native plants, they are often rather inefficient at pollinating them because they did not evolve with our native plants. Our native bee species are much better at pollinating our native plants. So a lot of times when we think of bees, we kind of as a general public, we just think of honeybees, but there are a lot of different types of bees out there. Estimated there are about 20,000 types of bees worldwide, at least 4,000 different species in the United States. Most diversity for bees is actually in Southwest United States, probably not somewhere you would typically think of, but most of the diversity is in the Southwest. Here in Illinois, we have about 500 species of bees. There's some research done years ago in Carlinville, Illinois, which is kind of south central Illinois. Just in the Carlinville area, they found 228 different types of species of bees just in that area. So again, a lot of diversity of bees. It's more than just honeybees. And our native bee species are really the ones that we should be focusing on and trying to save and conserve, not necessarily honeybees. So just a few examples of some of those native types. We've got our bumblebees, and this is one most people are probably familiar with. They will do something called buzz pollination. So they will vibrate their bodies to release pollen from flowers. A lot of our native plant species have evolved for this. So honeybees can't do buzz pollination, so they really can't pollinate those types of plants. Things like tomatoes need that. Peppers do like buzz pollination, blueberries, cranberries. Some of our crop plants that are native to the Americas have evolved for this buzz pollination, and honeybees can't really do that. Compared to honeybees, they operate in cooler temperatures. Again, because they can't vibrate their bodies, they will sun themselves and warm themselves up so they can operate in cooler temperatures. They are also social bees, but their colonies don't get nearly as large, typically 50 to 400 individuals, and they are annual. So that colony will start off with a queen in the spring. It'll build up and everything will die off. Come winter, they'll send off new queens, which will overwinter and start a new colony. Whereas honeybees will perpetuate just year after year after year. They'll produce new queens, but that colony will continue on. They are also cavity nesting. A lot of times they're nesting in the ground, abandoned rodent burrows. I've heard of them nesting in the base of bunch grasses, things like that. And they're also generalist pollinators. We have carpenter bee. We have one kind of species of these large carpenter bees, eastern carpenter bee. Because these are rather large bees, these are bigger than bumblebees. They're primarily feeding on large open-faced flowers, but they will also rob nectar. So in this picture here, you can see this plant has smaller flowers. So what this bee will do is will cut a hole at the base of the flower so they can access that nectar and drink it up. But they're skipping the anthers and all that. So they're not picking up pollen, not pollinating plants. So they're robbing that nectar from that flower. Some people consider this a pest because they do nest in wood. So you can see on the bottom picture there, they'll tunnel these galleries into wood, which can cause some damage. Best way to prevent that is to paint wood. They don't like painted surfaces, and typically they'll leave it alone if you paint it. Typically going to be solitary, but you can have some females living together, and they will visit a wide variety of different types of flowers. We've got our small carpenter bees. These have weaker jaws than large carpenter bees, and these are nesting in a lot of times pithy centers of stems. It's one of the reasons why you want to leave spent flowers, leave those flower stalks behind. There's things like these small carpenter bees will build their nests in there. And you can see in that bottom picture there, they'll have these individual cells where they'll collect some pollen, make a pollen ball, lay an egg in that, and then kind of go down the line. Mason bees. So these are important in orchard or fruit fertilization. These come out rather early in the year compared to some of these other bees. They're called mason bees because they use mud to divide their brood cells. So you can see again that see that in the bottom picture there. Create that pollen ball, they'll lay an egg, and they'll section that off with mud to create these individual cells for their offspring. They are tunnel nesting, so they'll do this in abandoned rodent or abandoned beetle galleries. If the pithy stems are big enough, they may use those. You can put out the man-made nests. They'll readily use those. That's typically what they're trying to attract as mason bees, as well as leafcutter bees. So similar to mason bees, these come out in the summer. So these are more of a warm weather species. They are using leaf material, foliage to divide their nests. You can see that top picture there. You see these rounded kind of cutouts in your leaves. It's a good chance that sweat bees or these leafcutter bees are doing that. They like to use leaves that don't have a lot of veins. So like rose, ash tree, if ash borer hasn't killed it on you, lilac, Virginia creeper, some examples of plants they like to use to cut from to create their nests. And again, these are tunnel nesting. So again, those man-made bee houses and stuff like that are another species those are trying to attract. We also have our sweat bees. So these are little metallic bees. Again, they may visit you to drink up your sweat to get the salts from that. A lot of times they're going to be metallic, so metallic green. Some can be blue, green, yellow. It just kind of depends on the species that are out there. This is a very diverse group, so some of these will be solitary, some will be social. Most of them are actually going to be nesting in the ground. Most of our native bee species actually nest in the ground. So that's one of the reasons why we don't necessarily want to mulch everything if you want to be able to have habitat for these. So speaking of habitat, we'll talk about some of the different ways you can make your landscape more attractive to some of these beneficial insects, both pollinators and predators and parasites. So first off, they need food. So they need their host or their prey in order for them to be around. And remember, a lot of our predators and our parasitoids as adults, they may or may not be predators of other insects, but most of them will eat pollen or nectar. So having that around will keep them around if you don't have any insects for them to feed on. They'll stick around until those pest populations show up. They also are going to need shelter. So in-season refuges. If we have bad weather, they need somewhere to hang out. They need overwintering sites. So again, you have these overwintering sites in the spring, they'll emerge and move out. If they have nowhere to overwinter, they're not going to stick around in your landscape. And then nesting sites, especially for pollinators, depending on the type of pollinator. Having those tree snags, bare ground, things like that. So pollinator habitat tips, and again, a lot of this is going to work for our predators and parasitoids as well. You want to choose heavy pollen and nectar producing plants, whether that be native or non-native species. A lot of times we get, especially lately, we kind of get that tunnel vision on everything has to be native, but there are non-native species that do a good job of providing floral resources, that nectar and pollen, for our pollinators and for our other natural enemies. I'm going to plant a variety of different flowers for season-long blooming and blossom shapes. So you think about those pollinator syndromes, different types of insects are attracted to different types of plants. So the more diversity of flowers you have out there, shapes and sizes and smells and colors, the more types of insects you're going to draw and the more diversity you're going to have. You also want to have plants blooming the entire season, March to October. We do a really good job in the summer months. A lot of times our landscapes don't necessarily have a lot of stuff blooming end of March, April, into April, May, and then again in the fall. A lot of times we have a dearth in our landscapes of floral resources. So if you're going to do one thing, probably focus on that early and late season flowers. You also want to plant in clumps rather than single plants. So a large mass of flowers is going to be much more attractive than a solitary flower or solitary plant out there. Something is better than nothing, but if you can, try to clump stuff together to make it more attractive. As far as our predators and parasitoids go, when it comes to flowers, again, a lot of them are going to need pollen and nectar as adults. Since a lot of these are smaller insects, they tend to like small open-faced flowers with exposed nectaries and stuff. So plants in the carrot family, aster family, spurge, pea and bee families are rather attractive to them. So something like a Queen Anne's lace. If you grow carrots and some start to flower, let them flower. If you grow herbs, let some of those herbs flower. Those flowers are attractive to those insects. Like I mentioned, native plants, a lot of our native pollinators evolved with native plants, so they are a very good match for them. Just some notes. So plants recorded as growing wild in an area at the time of scientific collection began in the area. That's kind of the definition of a native plant. But what does that mean to you? For some people, if it's native to North America, that's good enough. For some people, if it's native to Illinois, that's good enough. Some people want it native to their region. Some people want it native to their county. It's kind of up to the individual. It's up to you to decide what's native, what's kind of good enough for you. And just because it's native does not mean it's a good garden plant. A lot of our native species can be rather aggressive and take over. It does not mean it's going to have fewer disease or pest problems. Things out in nature, we kind of tend to overlook that when they are in our landscapes, which are much more managed. We tend to notice that, and they will have insect and disease problems on there. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to grow better. Climate-wise, yes, they evolved with our climate. But when you think of a typical urban or suburban soil, a lot of time that topsoil has been removed, and we're growing in less than ideal soils, which they did not evolve with. It also does not mean they are more desirable than native plants. So this picture right here, say you're going on a hike, you see this flower, you think it's pretty, you think I want that in my garden. That's poison ivy. Poison ivy is a native plant. I don't know of anybody that wants to grow poison ivy and wants that in their landscape. So just because it's native doesn't mean you necessarily want it in your garden. This is what I was talking about for the bloom season. Again, having stuff March through October. Again, we do pretty good in that May, July, August timeframe. First 2 months, last 2 months, you know, we tend to not have quite as much blooming, but you want that season-long bloom period to keep that stuff around so they can survive. And that early and late season is particularly important for insects that are overwintering. In the spring, they're waking up. They need to build up those reserves. In the fall, if they're overwintering, they need to build up those reserves so they can get through the winter. When it comes to plants, trees and shrubs can play an important role early in the year. So here in Jacksonville, which is in west central Illinois, if you're not familiar where that is, we're about 40 minutes from Springfield, west of Springfield. Some of the maples are already starting to bloom. Maples are early bloomers. These are just some examples of early blooming trees that are attractive to pollinators and things. So don't overlook the importance of trees when it comes to providing pollen and nectar to insects. Like I mentioned before, ornamental annual bedding plants can also play an important role. If you don't want to plant natives, it's okay. Don't let anybody shame you into thinking you need to grow native plants. Ornamental plants, if that's all you want to grow, they can still provide pollen and nectar for pollinators and beneficial insects. Just some examples, top left there, we've got some allium. In the middle, salvia, zinnias are very attractive to pollinators, particularly butterflies. On the bottom, we have cosmos, autumn joy sedum in the middle there. If you grow that in the fall, you can walk out there and you can just hear the buzz from bees and stuff visiting it. It is very attractive. Sunflowers, again, are also very attractive, particularly to bees. Like I mentioned before, herbs can also be very attractive. So if you grow some herbs, let some of them go to flower. A lot of our smaller bee species and a lot of our parasitoid wasp and other natural enemies will visit these for the pollen and nectar. So if you grow, you got 3 or 4 basil plants, maybe just let one of them go to flower and you can just keep cutting the other ones down so they don't flower so you can get better harvest. Weeds. A weed is a plant whose virtue has yet to be found. One of the issues with pollinators is kind of lack of habitat, lack of flora resources. When we think of our kind of stereotypical suburban lawn, it's that nice lush green growth with nothing else growing in there. That's kind of a desert for a lot of insects. You know, there's nothing for most insects to feed on. So let those dandelions grow, let the clover grow. That's providing some of that pollen and nectar for insects. And then down the bottom there, we have common purslane. A lot of people would consider that a weed, but that is the food source for the white-lined sphinx moth. So some of our weedy species, violet would be another one. Things that we consider weeds are food sources for moths and butterflies in the larval stage, those caterpillars. Great spangled fritillary feeds on violet. So if you want some of these butterflies and moths in your landscape, you need to provide those larval food sources for them as well. A couple places you can look at for selecting plants. Pollinator Partnership and Xerxes Society have a lot of good plant lists on their websites, kind of focused on different regions of the country. So that's one place to check out if you're in the market for native plants. They focus on native plants in those. Few more tips here, almost done. You want to provide habitat for nesting and egg laying. So providing different layers in the landscape. Again, we think of the kind of the stereotypical lawn. A lot of you may not fit into that, but it's just kind of all one level. We got a lot of grass. We may have a shrub here and there, maybe a tree. The different insects are going to fit into different layers in the landscape. So having, low growing plants, trees, shrubs, taller, herbaceous perennials, trees, those different layers or different insects are going to fit into different layers within the landscape. Having small patches of bare or semi-bare ground, so you have places for your ground nesting bees. A lot of times in horticulture, we kind of preach mulch, mulch, mulch. If you mulch everything, you're kind of excluding some of that habitat for some of our pollinators. So it's okay to leave some bare patches here and there. Leaving dead tree trunks if it doesn't pose a danger to humans or your home or something like that. Maybe leave some of those dead tree snags. Beetles will move in there to make galleries, which then can be used by bees and other things. Carpenter bees may nest in that instead of your house or your deck too. Brush piles are good for overwintering insects. A lot of our bees and wasps may utilize those to overwinter in. And then access to mud for things like mason bees, so they can build those, divide those brood cells up in those tunnels. I also want to provide protection from wind and weather. Just like humans, insects don't necessarily like being out in storms, so they have somewhere they can ride out in inclement weather, all the better. A lot of times we see these pollinator hotels, and you can buy, like the ones in the middle there, you can buy those. These make good homes for things like mason bees, leafcutter bees. If you're going to do something like this, you want to get one like in the middle there that have kind of the shelves that can be taken apart and cleaned out. If you're using a solid wood block, after a few years, predators and diseases and stuff will build up in there, and you'll start losing your bees because that stuff just builds up over time. So if you have something you can open up and clean out, that's a lot better. Not just bees are going to visit these though. Top right there, that is a wasp. A lot of grass wasps. Again, they'll utilize these tunnels. So you may see a bunch of grass sticking out of one of these holes. You probably had a wasp move in there. But again, they're feeding their offspring caterpillars, so they're doing some pest control for you. So that's a good thing to have those there. On the bottom right there, that is a butterfly house. A lot of places will sell these as places for butterflies to overwinter. They don't. I think it was Penn State did some research. They looked at 30 or 40 different butterfly houses. They didn't find a single butterfly in any of those. They found some wasps, they found some spiders, but no butterflies. So if you're putting those up for butterflies, save your money and don't buy them, but they will provide habitat for other types of insects. Grasses and sedges can also be important. So a lot of times we focus on the flowers, but grasses and sedges, they can enhance your design. They can also provide habitat. So again, bumblebees may build their nests at the bases of that. Some caterpillars, different types of caterpillars will feed on these as well. So again, just make your landscape that much more attractive. Ground beetles will utilize these to kind of hang out in when they're not feeding as well. So don't discount kind of your non-showy flowering plants as well. This is the last of my tips here. So be willing to accept some plant damage. Remember, leafcutter bees are going to cut up leaves. Caterpillars are going to feed on foliage. So if you have that tomato hornworm eating your tomato plant, if you want these sphinx moths, you're going to have to be willing to accept some damage. So if you want these, grow a sacrificial tomato plant, plant 3 or 4, leave 1 to the caterpillars, 2 or 3 to yourself. If you see any of those caterpillars, pick them off, put them on that sacrificial plant. And remember that, if you do have pest insects out there, take a close look. You may have some predators and parasites out there. You may not need to actually manage them. Those predators and parasitoids may actually be working for you. Just give them some time. I want to follow integrated pest management practices. Ideally, you should be doing this regardless of whether or not you're trying to attract insects to your landscape. So use pesticides only when necessary. We kind of want to get away from that spray and pray approach. make sure you have a good reason for spraying. Don't just spray for the sake of spraying. Do not apply pesticides to plants in bloom. More and more, a lot of our insecticides have on the label, do not apply to plants in bloom. So it's getting much more restrictive on that, and that's a good thing. If you do have to apply to a plant that is in bloom and you have a product that you can, do that when your pollinators are going to be less active, either dawn or dusk. I would probably do it at dusk. That gives that much more time to dry out before your pollinators start showing up. Avoiding drift and runoff. You don't want that pesticide getting on those non-target plants and affecting non-target organisms. And then look for pesticides that are known to be less harmful to pollinators and other beneficials. So if you're trying to manage caterpillars and stuff, use something like a BTK. That's Bacillus thuringiensis Christachii. That is a bacteria that only attacks caterpillars. It's not going to affect any other type of insect. So it's a very selective product. Look for things like that. And again, those parasitoids may show up. If you see something like that, just leave that in your garden. You also want to watch your garden, keep a journal. Look at what's happening, take note. What plants are your pollinators really attractive to? Maybe that's something you want to plant more of. If you've got stuff that nothing is visiting, maybe you're just missing them, or maybe that's something you don't want to plant more of because it's just not very attractive. And with that, I am done. So that's what I look like, at least 8 years ago. That's what I look like. There's my email. If you have any questions that you think of later. Like I mentioned, I am some colleagues and we have a Good Growing blog. So there's the information for that if you want to check out, as well as the Good Growing podcast. Since I have a captive audience, I figured I'd do some self-promotion here.
Great. Thank you, Ken. I want to ask Bob Fisher, if he's out there, if he wanted to do the questions, or if you want me to, Bob. Put your questions in the chat for me. And then if we, whoops. If you could stop sharing, we could actually see you, Ken. Okay. I don't see Bob, so.
Yeah,
Are you there? Okay.
my camera isn't working, so I can't help there. There's a question right here, Ken, a couple of them already. If there are yellow aphids on your milkweeds, do you leave them or pick them off?
I'll turn my camera on so you can see me. I personally, leave them on my milkweed. So a lot of the pictures in my presentation of the aphids, those are all from my garden. I went out last year looking for some stuff because I was writing an article. Found those aphids, found a few of the parasitoid wasp and some of those lacewing larvae and syrphid larvae. And I went back 3 or 4 days later and there's almost no aphids left. So once those things move in, they'll clean them up pretty quick for you. And if you've got aphids on your milkweed, there's really nothing you can put on there to control those. If you're trying to grow those for monarchs, that's not going to affect the monarchs. You just kind of have to live with those.
Another question here, are the various mantid species native to our area?
So we do have native mantid species. The one we see a lot, the really big ones, the Chinese mantids, those are at least the ones I see most often. Those are not native. But we do have some native species there. They tend to be a lot smaller though, the Chinese mantids.
I'll mention just for general information, if you go up on the Hawkwatch Hill at Green Valley, when it's open in September, you can see mantids in a sense migrating. And I've always wondered, are they actually migrating or are they just moving short distances?
They're just moving. They may be kind of congregating to mate and stuff and lay their eggs, and because all the adults, they'll die out come fall, winter.
You mentioned native trees. Okay, here's a question. Nematodes and treating grubs. What time of year?
So that's going to depend on the type of grub you're trying to treat. But a good time to do that is kind of in the fall if you're doing like Japanese beetles, because in the spring those larvae are pretty big and they're not. The nematodes can still get in there, but if you do it in the fall, they can get in there before those grubs get real big and do a lot of damage. But it may just kind of depend on what type of grub you've got. So you may need to dig some up and ID those, and you can take those to your local extension office and they can do it, or I'll start getting pictures and I can do it for you.
There's a question here about one of the pesticide, or let's say lawn control companies, or in this case, Mosquito Joe. How do you feel about that type of insect control?
So I'm assuming this is one of those places that will come out and spray your
Yeah.
lawn and stuff for them. So mosquitoes are kind of tricky because they can be a public health issue with some of the diseases they spread. I can say I personally do not spray my lawn or my landscape for mosquitoes. I understand why people may want to, and I don't know about like Mosquito Joe and stuff what they're using, but a lot of times like municipalities, they're using very low doses. There's still probably a good chance it's affecting our beneficial insects, but you kind of have to weigh that public health with it. A lot of times it's kind of a no-win situation. You don't want an outbreak of some of these diseases they can spread, because you have to protect public health. That's kind of number one for most places. But you do run into the issue of those non-target effects.
Another question here is, there's an orange and black milkweed bug that are seen on milkweeds in late summer. Is that a type of beetle that's feeding on aphids perhaps?
So there are a couple different types of milkweed bugs. There is also a milkweed beetle. Those are going to be feeding on the plant itself, and those are native species. They evolved with it. They're supposed to be there, so to speak. And there's been some research that I've seen that the milkweed plants that have some of these other insects feeding on them, like the milkweed bugs, milkweed beetles. The monarchs that feed on them a lot of times are more successful because they produce more of those defense chemicals that the monarchs will incorporate into their body. So it's good. There's a whole community on milkweed that we kind of overlook. We focus on monarchs, but there's a lot of other insects that rely on milkweed as their food source.
And there was a sort of a general question about when is the best time to start removing leaf litter, et cetera, in the spring.
Ideally,
Is a good time, maybe.
as long as you can wait. A lot of it depends on personal preference. If the city's coming after you and saying you got to clean it up, you better clean it up. But general recommendation is, once you plant tomatoes outside would be a good time. By then, most things that are going to be overwintering, and that leaf litter will have warmed up and emerged. So wait as long as you can, ideally. Probably mid-May, at least mid-May here in Central Illinois, maybe a little bit later for you guys.
So the later the better, basically, certainly well past frost or last frost.
Yeah, a lot of places, some places will say, wait till tax day. Some will say wait till you plant tomatoes, because by then everything should be sufficiently warmed up, and anything that was overwintering in there, there's a good chance it's emerged and moved on by then. If you do it this time of year, none of those insects that are overwintering in there probably have emerged yet. So you're kind of tossing them out as well.
A question about butterfly weed beetles. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with that term? They are red and multiply quickly.
So yeah, like I say, there's milkweed beetles, there's milkweed bugs. like the milkweed bugs, a lot of times you see those on the seed pods. Those can build up pretty quickly, and they're just feeding on the seeds of milkweed. It's milkweed, like I said, there's a lot of different things that feed on milkweed. We've just kind of picked monarchs to be the one that should be allowed to, but a lot of other things will too.
A question from me, I guess, would be, do you suggest or recommend that if you're planting milkweeds, you should plant a variety, not just the most common one?
Yeah, variety, is always good. The more you have out there, the better. And planting other plants. So the milkweed, some insects will feed on that nectar and stuff. Primarily why we're growing milkweed is for that larval food source for the monarch caterpillars. But those adults still need pollen or still need nectar. So you need to have some flowering plants too to kind of keep those adults around and feed them as well. So milkweed is only part of it.
Is there a good website to use to ID insects?
One that I like is Bug Guide. That's run out of Iowa State University. You can submit pictures there. People will ID them. You can go through and stuff. And there's a lot of experts on there, or just people like you and me who aren't necessarily experts on a specific group. That'll ID them. It's bugguide.net is a good one.
Buckeye.net.
Bug Guide, yeah.
Bug Guide, I'm sorry.
Yeah, somebody said iNaturalist. I've never really used iNaturalist, but that's another one I've heard good things about. And every county in the state has an extension office, so you can take insects or send pictures into your local office, and if they can't do it, they will find somebody in the state who can.
There were a couple other questions that I missed here. Let's see. I think all of us wonder about this at times. Is there any practical way to, shall we say, see flowers that are visible or colorful in UV light? I mean, is that the sort of thing we'd get a UV light projector if you?
No, I haven't tried that. I don't know if that would work. You can go online and find pictures. People have done photography of it. I'm not sure how they do it, but there are galleries out there where you can look at pictures of plants under kind of the visible light to us, and then under and light and what they would look like to a bee, where you can see those UV patterns. A lot of times you have these dark lines on the petals, kind of going towards the middle, or the middle of that flower is really dark. Again, it's kind of like a big billboard saying, "Hey, come here. This is where the pollen and nectar is at." But I'm not sure if you'd be able to see it if you just shined a UV light on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. So I think most of the questions that are on the chat. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? You can just unmute and ask them if you'd like.
There was one more, Bob, about in the picture before the wasp and the top picture of the symptoms of parasitized host.
Yeah.
What were all the little white things amid the aphids? That's the question. Do you recall that slide, Ken?
So the white things were probably like the skins of aphids that have molted. Yeah. So the yellow ones were the actual living aphids. The brown ones were the mummies. The white things would have just been the molts. So in order for insects to grow larger, they have to molt. They shed their skin kind of like a snake.
Right.
So
and
probably
there was a question early on as well. Our area is due for the 17-year locust, but I think she means cicadas in 2024. Should we be concerned about damage to our plants? And if so, what can we do proactively?
First off, you should be very excited. I am looking forward to when they show up. I don't know if I've ever lived through one. I think I've always missed them by a year or two. So I am looking forward to it. As far as plant damage, so if it's 2024, I would not plant any new trees in 2023. They can, if you get enough of them on a young tree, they can kill branches and potentially kill a tree. If you do have young trees, you probably want to net them when they start coming up, so you don't get a lot of egg laying. With those, they will lay their eggs. They have a scissor or a saw like ovipositor they lay their egg with. They'll slice into small branches and stuff and lay their eggs in there. Eggs will hatch, nymphs will fall to the ground, and they'll be in the ground for 17 years. But you can see some pretty good damage to young trees like that. So maybe hold off on tree planting. Obviously, if you need a tree, plant it, but maybe wait a year, especially 2024, or wait till they're done before you plant, or cover those. Get ready to cover them. As far as other woody plant material is kind of the biggest concern. Your other things should be fine.
Yeah. Other than that, I think you covered everything, Bob. Lots of thanks and very informative. People have really enjoyed the talk. Great presentation. Somebody's very proud to be a UIUC alumni.
And I had one question.
Okay.
What kind of hand lens would you suggest so that we can see the details to identify an insect, especially for people that are over 55?
So a lot of times the magnifying glasses that you're using, like for scouting and stuff, are going to be like a 5x, 10x little circular hand lens. They're not terribly large, and it takes a little bit of practice to get those focused. Usually hold them up to your eye and bring what you're looking at back and forth, or rock back and forth, because they don't have a really deep field of view. It's kind of shallow.
Yeah.
There are also relatively cheap USB microscopes that just plug into your computer that you could try to bring the plant material inside, get that USB microscope, and kind of check it out that way too. Even just a regular old magnifying glass is going to be better than nothing.
And I see one more question. Did you talk about nectar guides, or can you give it?
Yeah, a little bit. Usually I have a slide on that. I must have deleted that, putting us to get narrowing down my topic here. Yeah, those UV patterns. A lot of times, those darker areas near the center. Sometimes they are, when you think like foxgloves, they have all those dots on the underside of the flower going up into the middle.
Okay.
That would be another example. Again, it's just kind of a billboard or road map saying, hey, come this way to get the nectar and pollen.
Cool. Never heard it called that. That's cool. Anyone else out there?
Just a quick comment on magnifying glasses. I've done it, and I suspect other people have done it too. Most of us have a phone that has a camera, and you can magnify, and you can get some pretty darn good pictures of insects that are quite small using that feature on your camera.
Yes, just make sure it's in focus.
Yep, 2 hands.
Well,
All right.
Ken,
Anything
this is
else?
terrific. Thank you so much. And I'd remind everybody, check out the extension website and check out Ken's blog. He has a lot of solid information, and it's very well presented. And I think it's a great resource that that's available to all of us. So thank you very much, Ken.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much. And hang on, if you're out there, we're going to go ahead and start our general meeting. So you're all welcome to join us and learn a little bit more about our club and all the happenings. So I'm going to turn it over to our president, Lori Lusso.
Hey. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. Glad to have you, and we welcome you back. So we're going to start out, if everyone has their agenda, if you'll follow along with me, and I'll go ahead and read our conservation pledge. I pledge to uphold the principles of the Garden Clubs of Illinois, the beautification of our state, kept void of litter, the protection of all wildlife, and the conservation of its natural resources for present and future generations. So, and that's what we believe. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Lori Lusso, president of the Darien Garden Club for this year and next year. So thank you to my board for voting me in. And I would like to welcome all of our guests. Again, glad to have you, and we look forward to having you back for April, and we'll introduce that program in just a minute. So now a little bit of housekeeping. I'm hoping that our full membership has had a chance to review the February general meeting minutes. And I would like to have a show of hands to see if everyone approves of those February minutes. Okay, looks good. We've got a consensus. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce our Vice President, Gina Pignato.
Hi. Tonight, I'm just reporting on a new program that we're starting. It's a walking program, and that will start in April. And the first one is April 19th. And there will be more to come about the walking group in our newsletter. And those that are interested could sign up when we send that information out. And we hope that we get some nice crowds to come and join us for a great walk in nature. Oh, and Charlene will be our leader, and Phyllis is going to be our co-leader for that group.
Oops, great. Thank you very much. Oops, okay. I'm unmuted. All right. Thank you, Gina. And next we have our treasurer, Karen Doyle.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Our balance as of today is $8,463. Just going to round it to even dollars. I'm still missing some renewal checks, and this month I have to renew with GCI. So if you have not received an email with a confirmation that you've paid, I still am looking for renewal checks. There's about 15, I think, out there. Judy Ray might have a better number, but please get those checks in because we'd like to keep you on board. So again, if you haven't received a receipt from me via email, I haven't gotten payment for you, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So next we have our general meeting secretary, Pat Juranek. Would you like to wave so we know who you are? Okay. I'm just seeing her name coming up. So thank you, Pat, for being here and taking the minutes. Our board meeting secretary is Melissa Hanson. Melissa, do you want to wave? Do you have anything to report?
Hello, thank you, but no, I don't have anything to report at this time.
Okay, no problem. All right, and our corresponding secretary is Sylvia McIver.
It'd be good if I could correspond by unmuting my phone. The only thing I was going to mention is I try to send out cards, get well cards, and any kind of correspondence to members that might have something going on. The best thing to do is to text me because sometimes the Gmails get buried with all the other Gmails. And I do keep a record of what I've been sending out. And then in addition, I know that there's been something put out to the membership that our new mailing address, we have a slot over at City Hall. So Garden Club mail can go to City Hall, basically just addressed Darien Garden Club, care of Darien City Hall, and then the address on Plainfield Road.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sylvia. All right, and then we're going to go right into our committee reports. And Bob Fisher, you're up next, our program for April.
Sorry about that. Our April program is going to be about small shrubs and trees. It's also presented by a member of the University of Illinois Extension Program. In fact, Ken is the person who recommended Ryan. His name is Ryan Pankow, and he is going to be talking about understory, or let's say small trees and shrubs, and how we can use them in our gardens here. It should be a good cross section, and hopefully we'll also be able to talk about where some of these plants are and will be available, so that we not only we can hear about wanting to plant something, but we'll know where we might be able to go to get it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm a big fan of native shrubs and trees. And we've got a very, very well, I'm not sure, I'm groping for a word. He knows his stuff, let's put it that way. So that's my report for April.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Looks like it's going to be another exciting one. So, okay, we're going to move on to May's program will be a plant exchange. And this one is live at the church. So that's St. John Lutheran Church in Darien. And this one will be open to guests also. So we invite everyone to join us. So members and guests are invited to bring up to 4 plants, potted, and in each one in an individual plastic bag, so we can minimize any dirt that we're going to either leave in the parking lot, or if it's inclement weather, will be inside. But we're going to try to be outside depending on the weather. So bring a lawn chair and your own beverage, and we'll talk to hospitality if they want to do snacks for us. All right, so with that said, we're going to move to Judy Ray, who's heading up our membership.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. We had a total of 61 people here, and about half were members. So we had a really great turnout from the community, and glad to see that. And we'll be reaching out to people that haven't renewed. I believe there's about 10 or 12 people, but otherwise, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judy. And we will move to Kathy Street for community outreach and service projects.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to thank everyone who helped volunteer on Saturday. We had a pretty nice crowd. About 50 or 60 people came through the library for the seed exchange. We didn't have as many kids as we wanted, but we still had a good time. So I went over this in the PowerPoint earlier, but I just want you to go through some dates of what's coming up. So April 29th, after our meeting, first of all, is our meeting, April 5th. And then April 29th, Arbor Day will be at the Darien Park District Community Center, 9:30. Charviome knows more about that, but I just want you to put that on your calendar, and we'll be spreading the word about that to come out and support Arbor Day. On April 30th, from 1 to 2:30, we're going to have the iNaturalist City Nature Challenge at the library. Chris is going to do a PowerPoint presentation, and then we're going to, she and I at least, are going to walk outside with the people who come and help them learn how to use iNaturalist. And if you are one of those who are wanting to learn, come out, and we're going to go out in nature that afternoon and try to find some things on the grounds there, or maybe head to the park. The next thing on my list is June 6th. Our National Garden Week program presentation is Birds, Bees, and Butterflies with Sarah Michelle. June 26th, we're having a pollinator party at the library. That's in the afternoon, 1:30 to 3:30. And so far I have booked Pat Miller, who is a member. She's going to cover monarchs for us. She's a monarch guru. And then I have Adrian Ayers Fisher from West Cook Wild Ones, who's going to cover native bees, which are some of the things we learned about tonight. And we're also going to cover some other pollinators that you might not know are pollinators, such as the beetles and so forth. So That's June 26th. I just confirmed today, July 16th, we're going to have Darien Park District habitat tours with the contractor who planted the gardens at Chestnut, Birchwood, and Holly Parks. So we'll mark that calendar date down. July 30th at the library, we're going to do some information on the Monarch Flyway from Route 66 Flyway. And we're going to have a woman come with a tent with monarchs in it that you can actually walk through. So that's kind of cool. And that's all we have. But I wanted you guys to get those down on your calendar because we're also going to need volunteer help too. So thank you.
Okay, great job, Kathy. You're going to keep us real busy this summer.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to Pat Zubik and field trips.
Hi, everyone. Our first field trip is to the Garfield Park Conservatory for their spring flower show. It is Friday, April 8th from 11:30 to 12:30, and that's in Chicago. Originally, I sent out something in the newsletter that they need a proof of vaccination and masks, but Chicago has since lifted their requirements. So you don't need to prove you've been vaccinated, and you don't need to wear a mask unless you'd like to. So we are going to meet at the Jewel parking lot and carpool together. And there is a limit of 20 people because you do have to give them a number and reserve a spot. So the first 20 people that respond positively to my Evite, which went out today to everybody that has an email in our club, first 20 people will be in. And after that, if we do get if we do get anybody after that, I'll reach out to Garfield Park and see if they will accept more. And then after that, we'll come back, maybe go to Oak Park, maybe come all the way back and have a lunch together. So check your emails for your Evite. And if you didn't receive one, please give me a call or send me an email and I'll send it to you individually. But I think I do have everybody's emails. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Pat. And next we have Nature and Environment, Chris Basaki.
I have no report today.
Okay, no problem. Next we've got Lynn Pisano and Garden Therapy.
So if you were on before the presentation, you saw the wheatgrass basket that we're going to be doing at Dimensions and Aspired. So that's kind of exciting. And in April, the Sprouts are going to be doing the same project. So they're, I think Megan is asking for baskets to be donated for them. I know Kathy has enough wheat seed. I think she got 5 pounds of it. And for the first time, we're actually having the garden therapy people help us prepare for it. Usually Kathy and I prepare the different things, but everybody in the group took 2 baskets and planted their wheat seeds, and they'll be doing another batch for Dimensions, I think on March 14th. So that's kind of cool. We spread the joy in the growing and also got a big assist from everybody. So that's my report.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. And then we have awards, and that will be Yvonne Mlinarzek.
So there's really not a lot of activity going on right now. This is the time that we collect data. So anyone who's doing projects, the list here, the Sprouts I know is new, and that's going to, that'll be related to awards. Everything we do about pollinators, any kind of community outreach, and anything with artistic design and things that we're doing. So if you're doing any kind of project, Please document. One of the things they want me to submit when I do this in November is volunteer hours. So if you're doing a project, please just try to log your best estimate of number of people and number of hours involved. And again, anyone who's doing anything, if you could please just share it at the meetings or the board meetings, and then I will do everything I can to try to plug it into a possibility for an award. So again, this is a kind of a quiet but important time, just, you know, to keep that data flowing consistently. So, and then I guess we'll find out fairly soon from GCI. Judy, when do we find out about the awards from GCI? The spring meeting? You're still muted.
It's April meeting, the April meeting of GCI.
Okay. So that's what, you know, went in last year. But again, please just, they want data. So kind of a newer thing that they've implemented, that they want volunteer hours. And they also want, I think, number of participants, you know, because we know that Kathy can log like, you know, 2,000 hours a year, but they want to look at involvement of the total clubs and again, a lot about community outreach and really just, you know, spreading the word. And I think our club is really doing everything that they're looking for. And we started doing it before they were even looking for it. So power to us. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, and then we've got Megan Lawrence and Kathy Street talking about our sprouts.
I don't think Megan made it back on. She was going to try to tonight, but we're going to kick off on April 9th. As Lynn told you, we're going to do the wheat baskets with the kids. We're going to do a gardening 101 and sort of like how to plan your garden with the kids. So we're going to have an Evite go out, or excuse me, Eventbrite go out to the public where the families can sign up, and then we'll have a membership form and they can join the club, quote unquote, the Sprouts Club. Other than that, I think we'll be in contact for volunteers through Evite, just like we do garden therapy. There is a group of the volunteers that have signed up to work with children. We have those names, but if you're out there and you'd like to help us, please let Megan know that you're interested, and we can add you to those Evites so that we can collect how many volunteers we're going to have and ask you to bring things like tools and so forth. So let her know if you're interested in that. I think that's it.
Okay, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Basaki, newsletter.
Newsletter articles are due the Friday after the board meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and that should be March 18th.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, moving on then to our technology team. I'm not sure if Heather is on. And if she is not, Kathy, do you want to report anything?
I would just report that, well, everybody knows we have the new email info@daringgardenclub.com. That's through the Google Suite on our website. Judy, myself, and Heather have been working on the website, so take a look and see what's up there. There's a link for Sprouts by itself, and there's a link for the fundraiser. And of course, our meetings and so forth are on there. So we're going to try to drive everything where people will look there. The members will look there for information. So there's less emails and so forth. So look for that. And then like Sylvia mentioned, we have the new address as well. That's part of what we came up with at the technology group. So it's ongoing, and there'll be some other changes, I'm sure. So that's all.
I think it's looking great and a lot of good information on it. So I know I'm using it, and it's very convenient go to and get exactly what I need. So I encourage everyone to use it. And if you need the password, send me an email or a text. All right, the next one, Judy Ray, do you have anything to add for website?
No, not really. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, and we'll go to Judy Deutschek for our ongoing styrofoam recycling.
Yes, I had a lot of styrofoam dropped off, and I took it Saturday early before the seed swap. And in addition, I just want to mention that we've got a group of ladies who are going to set up the library display with me. Mary Gollinger, Monica Zers, and I can't say her name yet. I don't know her name yet. Julie Olafson and Deb Hartke.
Becky?
Is that how you pronounce it? Becky? Okay. So they're going to help set up the library display from May 1st till after our National Garden Week presentation 7th. So we'll have a nice display, and we've gotten lots of donations of items to put in the display case. Try to get there during May to see it.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you very much, Judy. So just a reminder, our GCI, that's our governing body. I think that's the right term for it. Garden Clubs of Illinois. Their convention is in April, the 24th and 25th. There is still time to attend. So go to your Garden Glories for the Garden Glories newsletter for the registration form, and you can mail in your check before April 9th. And at this particular, I should say there are 6 of us going to the meeting already. And we will be honoring both Lynn Pisano and Pat Zubek for their outstanding work last year during our Garden Walk fundraiser. So we want to recognize them, and the whole state of Illinois is going to recognize them for putting in all that extra work, and making it so very successful for our club. So thank you, ladies. Okay, with that said, we're going to move on to a new fundraiser, and it's called True Earth. And I'm going to let Kathy explain that.
Sure. Information went out in the newsletter, and it's also on the website. You need to order through the link that's specific for our club to get credit. We'll get 20% of the sales. And there's not only laundry soap strips that come that you tear apart and throw into your washer instead of liquid pouring and lugging. And so there's no plastic involved. They also have beeswax wrapped bags and different things, eco-friendly products. So take a look at the website, but make sure if you're going to order through that link. And I think that's about it. Any questions?
Just arrived today. I was so excited.
Oh, good. Yeah, Heather has ordered a few things too. So thanks for doing that.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you for putting the fundraiser together, and let's see if it's an easy way for us to raise funds. So, and keep our environment healthy. So, all right. So that next one is me, Lunch and Learn workshop. And our first one is going to be on creating silk flower arrangements. So back in October, we had a speaker come out and talk to us about arranging live flowers, or silk flowers, I guess, for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. So now we have a chance to get our hands into the projects. And so this is one that's already made up. Just a sample. I'm inviting everyone to, let me just kind of review. It's going to be this Saturday at St. John Lutheran Church. We're going to start at 10. We will have lunch. If you are only making one flower arrangement and you're quick at it and you want to go, that's great. If you want to stay and make several flower arrangements, we have the room till 2 o'clock, but we don't have to stay till 2. So come for as long or as short as you want. We should have a good time visiting with everyone. The menu currently is pizza and salad. So you'll have a chance to weigh in on what kind of pizza you like. And $5 is the cost to cover our lunch. Things that I'm going to encourage you to bring would be your own container, because only you know, are you the basket type, or do you like the glass vase, or so whatever type of container or pot, bring your own. Bring your own silk flowers that are going to match the decor in your home. We will have some greenery. Please bring some wire clippers, styrofoam to stuff in your container that the stems of the flowers are going to go into. You can bring your own glue gun, but we will have some to share. You can bring ribbon that will match your flowers, or use ribbon that we'll be sharing. And an apple. We're going to make an apple, just baked apple dessert for our lunch dessert. Okay, what's the club going to supply? Several experienced helpers, including Evelyn, and I'm going to see if Evelyn is still on, because she had a beautiful flower arrangement that she showed us earlier. Okay, but I don't think she's on right now. So,
Oh, yes, she is.
oh, here she is. Okay, Evelyn, take it away.
Can you see? Can you see my backdrop? My backdrop.
Yes, we can see it.
That's one of the sample that we can make. Whoever wants to do what kind of design they want, the style that they want. So depending on what kind of materials they can bring, they can create anything that they wanted to, to use or to put wherever it's part of their house. What kind of style they want. So the materials they bring, and if they want, and we have some materials that Lynn Paisano handed it to me today, some greeneries and some flowers. And I have some too that I bought from the dollar store. So we can share some of the spring flowers also. So we'll see what we can come up with. Everybody can be creative on Saturday and have some fun.
Thank you, Evelyn.
All right, thank you too.
Yes, we will. So I know Sachiko is going to join us. She's a tremendous floral designer with some very unique arrangements. So it's exciting to see the different styles from the different ladies. So we'll have, everyone will get their own table so you can spread out. We'll have a big sharing table with flowers and greenery and baskets and containers. Just trying to review if there's anything else. It's all on the newsletter on page 3. So if you have any more questions, contact me or take a look at the newsletter. We have a maximum of 25 people for the day. So I ask you to please email me and let me know if you are planning to attend. Okay, and that's all I've got. Any questions? Oh, Evelyn, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. I saw in your email, I saw it says there that, are we supposed to be making wreath too?
You can make a wreath, whatever container that you would like to add your silk flowers to is fine.
So maybe you can mention that to all of them who wanted to come and join us and see what kind of material they have, that if they wanted to have some wreath, make some wreath, and they have some extra materials for like a grapevine, they can bring also, and some ribbons that they want to use.
That's great. A straw wreath or a pine cone wreath, or yeah, whatever you have, if that's the shape that you want, maybe for the front door or the front porch, we'll help you decorate it.
Yes,
if you need help.
We can help.
We're there for consultants.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think that's good on the lunch and learn. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Good. Let's see. The workday workday at St. John Butterfly Garden. The next one coming up is April 2nd from 10 to noon. So thank you. If you can even come for just an hour, that would be very helpful. If you're not able to come on that particular day, but would like to put in some elbow grease and effort, come at your convenience. You don't have to be there with the rest of us, but we just have a good time together. So it's a good opportunity to get to know our friends. All right, we're covering the address again. It's on the agenda. Next general meeting is Monday, April 4th. We covered that with our speaker. I would like to acknowledge our March birthdays. So we have a couple of past birthdays. That would be Marilyn Kuba on March 1st, Noreen Bendis on March the 3rd, and Barbara Midzurczewski on March the 4th. And then some birthdays coming up would be Rosada Hines. I understand she's still out of town, but getting excited about returning to Illinois and gardening. Barb Pertel is on March 16th. Monica Zirbicki is on March the 24th, and Judy Ray on March the 27th. So happy birthday to all. Okay, now for a little fun part of our meeting. I'm going to ask, does everybody have your watering can handy? Let's see your watering can. Oh, okay. All right. Anybody have a nest? Nest? Bird? You
Right
okay?
here.
Couple? How about a bunny? Am I just a big kid or what? Okay.
The bird. The bird is
Okay, there we
out.
go. Okay, good. All right, this is going to be quick and easy. And I want to give credit to Pinky Riffle from the Peoria Garden Club. She is the original creator of the poem. It had been published in the Garden Glories in the summer of 2006. And she actually won an award for, or won the challenge for prose and poetry for that issue. So I'm going to ask Sylvia McIver to take over.
Great, thank you. So this is the ode to my watering can. I'll never have in my lifespan a tool as lovely as my watering can. I like it better than the hose for sprinkling water from its nose. And we had a discussion about whether it was nose or rose. I'm not alone in how I feel. Others think cans have appeal. When not in use, it plays a part on display as garden art. If left for long to sit and rest, it may be dressed with a robin's nest. But I have theories of my own. I'd like to think my grandpa had it, or 'twas an erstwhile home for Peter Rabbit. Cue the rabbit. Whatever the story, this I plan to always treasure my watering can.
Thank you all. Short and sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So let's see. We have a fun theme for April's meeting, and that's going to be headed up by Laurel Myers and Pat Miller. If anyone is interested in working with them on that particular program, whatever it might be, I ask you to contact them. That is all that I have for this evening. Does anyone have anything else that they might like to add?
This is Bob. I'd just like to add that if you have ideas or specific individuals that you've heard speak or you think would be good speakers for upcoming programs, please give me a call or send me an email. You know, the bigger the pool we have to draw on, the easier it is for the speaker's chair. So please don't hesitate if you have an idea for a subject or a name or a combination thereof.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Good. Does anyone else? Sylvia? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I have a question for Bob. Bob, when are we welcome back in your yard to see the spring birds starting to congregate?
Well, it's probably, I'm going to say conservatively, early April is when, by the way, the robins are back, as I think all of you have probably seen. But the longer distance migrants won't be back for probably another 4 to 5 weeks when they'll start flowing in. And I will quickly share an experience, and maybe we'll talk about doing something next year by way of a field trip. I was down at a place called Emiquon, and they had last week 800,000 snow geese.
Oh.
It's truly spectacular. If you're interested, drop me a note. I can send you a link to a short video that one of my friends took of this enormous they're on their way north already because they nest in the Arctic, but it's really spectacular.
Great. Thank you, Bob. That does sound wonderful. Good. All right. Again, anyone? Go ahead. Yes.
Eva, yeah. So I
Yvonne.
confess, I am one of the delinquent people that did not send in my dues. I wrote out my check about a month ago and went on vacation and just found it in my wallet again a couple days ago. So does Karen prefer that we mail it to her or to the new address at City Hall?
Could you mail it straight to me, Yvonne?
I will do that.
And
Tomorrow.
I'll wrap up this year and then we can start fresh with the next go around, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Sorry, got distracted.
That's okay.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? Okay, then I'm going to call this meeting adjourned and just thank you all for attending. And I hope you had fun and learned something about good bugs in our garden. Okay, thank you.
He was a good speaker.
He was great. Thank you, Bob. He was great. Good. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Good. See you soon.